Welcome into the debut episode of the Far Post podcast here on ussoccerpost.com. I'm Tim Zeep with Nick Kruger. Nick, exciting, huh?
This is a big moment for me. You know, first podcast, big moment for the website. We're really chugging along in the right direction now.
Now, we both have real full-time jobs, so we're trying to do our best doing the website as kind of a hobby, but we're both enjoying it. We hope you're enjoying the content. We're going to hopefully keep it coming, especially as the MLS season moves into full swing. This past weekend, Nick had a chance to actually go up to Charleston, South Carolina for the Carolina Challenge Cup. And it was a fun event for you. I know you had a good time. We actually had some weather problems. We were both supposed to go. Games were delayed. But all in all, what did you take away from it, and what did you see from especially guys like Breck Shea and Mix Diskerud?
Yeah, it was tough. You know, we were supposed to be out there for the last 2 days of games, Wednesday and Saturday, but inclement weather really didn't do us any favors on those Wednesday games. I was able to make it out there, for Friday to do some interviews and training sessions ahead of the games on Saturday, and really got albeit a short look, but a good look at Houston and Orlando and NYCFC. And Orlando and NYC, obviously the more interesting teams because they're the two expansion teams, and Orlando played against Houston. Their game was really went off the rails quickly with a couple of red cards, and unfortunately didn't get a chance to get the full scope of what we would expect to see from either team in that match between Orlando and Houston, because the flow of the game went off course so quickly. But honestly, NYC, their wrap-up game was against Charleston, and even though that's a USL Pro team, it was really an interesting look at NYCFC. Mix Diskerud coming in, his first action as an MLS player that we saw, really looked good, working with Ned Grabavoy, who's a draftee from Real Salt Lake, who Jason Christ, the coach of NYCFC, hand selected him, has experience with him out in Salt Lake, brought him over, and those two working in the midfield is really a dynamic pair. I was really excited to see them play. Mix got on the board with a goal, and NYC obviously handled that game very well against a lesser league team. But in the Orlando and Houston game, a couple of key players there. Kaká obviously is the guy that everybody's really excited about seeing in the MLS, and he played well, given the circumstances. Breck Shea, we've been seeing throughout the preseason his transition into that left back role, and obviously still some growth to do there, but the basics of his responsibilities at that position moving forward and contributing on the offense, you can see that he has a handle on that and is getting more comfortable doing that as well. And it was just it was fun. The weather held out on Saturday, and there were some good takeaways. Houston, three guys that we were excited to see: Brad Davis, Ricardo Clark, and Will Bruin, all working together, played very well. And two of those guys got on the board with goals in that game. So so it was a fun day of games that I got to see. A little bit of video content that you'll see trickle onto the website here in the next couple of days as well, and some more content. And it was a good way to wrap up the preseason heading into the MLS season.
It's kind of an interesting time for us as media observers, with all the MLS players that are playing on the U.S. national team now, and getting to see that many of them up close. Let's kind of focus on Shea, because he's been, talked about a lot as of late. You wrote a kind of in-depth piece with him there. Do you think he's going to be in the mix going forward for the national team? And do you think getting to Orlando and getting a chance to play as much as he's going to get to play is going to help him and maybe help him secure a spot with the squad?
Well, I think the broad belief with him is moving forward, his role with the national team. The clearest path for him to be a contributor most frequently is at that left back position. In the short term, it's going to be a little tough for him in the bigger tournaments with Fabian Johnson, a strong outside defender. He has one more really good World Cup cycle, with the U.S. men's national team to make an impact. And on the right side, you're breaking in Timmy Chandler and A couple other guys on the right side too. So Breck, this is a good opportunity for him. I think he's 25 years old right now. So if he uses this next World Cup window to kind of observe what Fabian does, because he's very good at the outside position of getting upfield, passing, shooting, doing everything offensively and still coming back and helping defensively. If he takes a look at what Fabian does, kind of models his game after him, and mixes in his own little spice with it, because he has physical attributes that a lot of other soccer players don't have. He's a bigger guy, longer guy. I think defensively we'd all like to see him get a little bit more aggressive. But if he continues to evolve and get more comfortable in that role, maybe not this next World Cup cycle. I mean, he's certainly a factor for tournaments like the Gold Cup coming up and the Confederations Cup with the U.S. men's national team in the future, when they participate in that. So, that'll give him a chance to get even more comfortable in that role. But as far as the direct impact in the next World Cup, I think he's still, not this next tournament, but he has a chance to really come in and be that guy 2 tournaments from now. And hopefully at that point, the U.S. men's national team is a bona fide contender to, make deep runs in the tournament at that point.
Well, another guy that might be key is Diskerud. I guess he's just going by mix now. We see him on the NYFC roster. He's a one-name man, right?
Yep, one name is on the back of his jersey. It's on the roster on the website. We laughed a little bit listening to other interviews on the way up here, and his name coming from overseas it's got a lot of letters in there. So just trimming it down to mix does us all a big favor. But I think watching him play too, it's fun to see his kind of evolution in a much shorter period of time. In our experience watching him, because I think he was a little. In the first couple times we've seen him play a little timid, a little, he kind of lets the game come to him. And as we've seen him in action more and more, I think he's been playing more within his comfort zone and getting it's appropriate his name is Mix now, because when he gets into the mix offensively and defensively, he's a much better player. And I think he's tougher than you would think, looking at him with the hair flowing in the wind,
right,
and kind of like the slender frame, but he's really coming along. And I think he's definitely a guy that the national team got in on at the right time and are bringing him along at a good pace.
How much do you think he's going to benefit from the move to MLS? I mean, I know we don't know much about the level of play from where he was at before, but I'm told it's supposed to be better in MLS. So do you think it's going to help him? And because, he's already firmly in the mix with the national team, but we saw, he didn't get any playing time at the World Cup. Do you think that move's going to help?
Well, I think where the major benefits are as far as that goes is we're starting to see a lot more men's national team players in the MLS in general, and he's going to be able to. And we'll talk a little bit about Toronto later on. But I mean, an example of Josie and Michael Bradley getting a chance to work together for an entire season. I mean, Mix will have a chance to see these guys on a regular basis, and the travel schedule in terms of when he'll be training with the men's national team is significantly lessened on him. So he'll have a more, the fatigue level should be less. His familiarity with the guys that he sees more often in men's national team camp should be greater. And I think even though all these guys obviously aren't on the same teams and in the same locker rooms, there's a level of camaraderie now that they're all in a more condensed area, all playing in the same league, and he's part of that.
All right, enough about the men. I mean, now let's get to it's a World Cup year for the ladies. We've been watching very closely the Algarve Cup, which, there's been some controversy over how to pronounce that. I mean, a lot of people think it should be Algarve. But, we got to go with what Rob Stone says on TV. He's the expert. So 2 games, 2 wins. You didn't get a chance to watch the full game against Norway, a 2-1 victory, which I saw. And then we watched a big 3-0 victory today over Switzerland. So, first of all, a couple takeaways. Exciting to see Hope Solo back. I mean, I'm very impressed with her. She was a little shaky in the first game. Today she came out, made some nice adjustments, was kind of attacking the ball and more importantly, making some key punches. I mean, she tried to make a few catches in the first game, almost gave up a bad goal right out of the gate against Norway. So she looks like she's back. I mean, we can talk about the off-the-field issues, but, they're not going to win the World Cup if she's not there. I think we both agree on that, right?
That's right. And with her back there, I mean, when you look at her play, even on television, relative to other women's players, I mean, just her like the physically imposing nature that she brings to the table. I mean, and you can insert your own joke with, you know, physicality in relation to her, but but I mean, just seeing her back there, having her as a presence in the goal has got to be a major confidence builder for the rest of the team, not just in terms of what she brings to the table, when a shot's coming her way, but just the level of confidence she brings as a player and a personality, running things back there has got to be a big boost. We saw it. They won 3-0 today against Switzerland.
Yeah, and I think, I was really impressed, especially in the Norway game with Carly Lloyd. I mean, she's really looking like kind of the backbone of the team now, because she's going to be playing all the time. She's very physical, doesn't seem to take anything from anyone, and she's out there running around with a black eye. She's knocking people over, and looking a lot like you when you're playing in your rec league games. But setting the tone physically, how important do you think that's going to be for the team to have that kind of edge or attitude being brought by her?
Well, I think when you look at the past couple of results that they've had, whether they've won or lost, they've or won when they shouldn't have won, whatever the situation may be, the results haven't been convincing. But the way that she plays, and sometimes to a fault, I felt like watching her today, she tried to do a little bit too much at times, coming off of a 2-goal performance against Norway, where she basically rescued the team, and come from behind fashion. But as long as she can, but she's definitely a impact maker, a starter, an ignition, for what they do in terms of a mentality and an attitude out on the field, and the toughness that she brings. I feel like at the women's level of soccer, confidence is just as important as ability. And when you see somebody out there like Hope Solo or Carly Lloyd, really taking charge of the situation, physically dominant out there on the ball, that really spreads in contagious fashion to the rest of the players on the field.
Yeah, we've seen a couple other names. Christine Press was looking good. I mean, we see some new people out there making an impact from the last time. I mean, I know we don't follow the women's game as closely as the men's, but, I was really a little nervous coming into this tournament because, we saw them struggling a little bit. The coaching change, obviously, 2 coaches in the last year or so. So I was worried. They come out, they start a little rough against Norway. They end up getting a win there. They get a big win today. I expect them to win on Monday, obviously, against Iceland. And then that'll set up the rematch with France. And I think that's what we're all going to point to as the game to see, okay, how ready is this squad for the World Cup? Because that's going to be the biggest game they play between now and the opening stages of the World Cup. So we'll be watching closely. We'll be paying close attention. But I think Jill Ellis, she doesn't have anything to worry about now in terms of her job security, right?
Well, it's been interesting because the past couple games, she really hasn't been taking full advantage of all the substitution opportunities, that she's had, I think, in the last couple of games. And obviously she knows which players she needs to take a longer look at than others, you would think. Right. But we've seen a couple players that we're all familiar with not getting quite as many minutes as you would expect. But you can't argue with the last couple of results that they've had either.
All right, so we'll be watching the ladies closely. We're going to be talking a lot about them, both on the site and on the future pods. So stick around for that for sure. Now let's get into the MLS and MLS, whatever you want to call it. we never really came out.
The MLS.
Yeah. So the CBA, that's wrapped up. I mean, I'm sure we're all tired of talking about it. I know I am. How important was it to get that deal done, though, and make sure the season started on time, especially with the momentum from the World Cup last year and everything we've seen with a lot of big names coming home?
Well, in principle, it's huge to get it done. This is MLS's 20th season. They've expanded with 2 other teams like we talked about. They have plans to expand even further in the next 2 years and then even more by 2020. There's a lot of factors going into the mix with what they're trying to do as a league and where they're trying to go. And personally, after I saw what the final details were reported to be coming out of the CBA, I felt like the players should have went on strike because I don't think that they got what the main sticking point was free agency, and what free agency ended up being coming. The first offer by the owners was if you were 32 years old and 8 or 10 years played in the league, which really applied to nobody at that point. And then what it ended up being was 28 years old and 8 years of service in the league, which before you're eligible for free agency, which, depending, I've played around with it in my head, depending on what type of player you are, it's good in some cases, it's not great in a lot more cases because, it really, MLS as a league is not to the English Premier League level. It's not to Serie A. It's not to, Bundesliga. It's not to like the top level leagues in the world, but it's still trying to fit into the mold of what a U.S. sports league is, which is, when you're talking about NBA, Major League Basketball, NFL, even though that's not really played so much elsewhere,
Right.
but those are all considered to be the pinnacle of those respective sports, and MLS is got a longer road to get to that point before they can start dictating the world economy in terms of soccer, because it runs itself so much differently than other sports does. But really what it does with free agency is it kind of keeps certain players at a certain level, that are just, good enough to stay on first team rosters in the MLS, which is a decent league, not one of the top tier leagues. But if you're a guy like Jesse Zardes, for example, who comes in, signs a homegrown contract, we're seeing him now with the national team getting looks and making plays. He's really going to have a tough decision to make because teams from overseas are going to come calling for him with big transfer fees and higher salaries, and he's definitely in designated player territory for MLS where they can pay him a lot of money, but is it going to be enough to keep him? And then once he gets through that second, in his case, it might be a third contract before he reaches that potential of being a free agent to where he can capitalize on, and he'll be a designated player, so he'll be making 115% of whatever his salary was before that. I don't know that it's a longer path, and it encourages players to kind of stay at like a B+ level, maybe,
Right.
if they want to capitalize on what free agency actually is in this incarnation. I think really more than anything, it was a jumping off point for what the next CBA is going to be in relation to free agency 5 years from now. I think the best thing about it is probably the increase in the salary floor for some of the rookies and lower salaried players. It goes up from 35,000 or abouts to 60,000. And player expenses and travel and things like that for these guys, for a broad part of the personnel in the league, that's a big deal to them. And for these guys now, that's a big win for a big part of the league. But if free agency is really what we're talking about, is the big deal here, I don't think the players came out on the top on that one.
Well, I think it's going to come down, like you said, this is setting the table for a few years from now when we go through this all over again. The key is going to be keeping these attendance levels rising and getting the TV audience to pay attention. If there's more money to go around for the owners, I think that's when we could see free agency become more of a reality, or especially what we're used to seeing maybe in the NFL or NBA or Major League Baseball. So that's wrapped up. Let's do a little rapid fire here. We got an opening weekend. We're actually in Orlando. We have to head down to Miami. We're going to miss, the 60,000 game here at the Citrus Bowl, which bad timing by us, but when you're on the road, you're on the road. So let's go 3 quick games. Give us some quick thoughts, what to look for, especially guys we're looking for from a U.S. national team perspective. First, best logo in the league, the Vancouver Whitecaps. I wish I was a fan so I could buy the clothes. Playing at Toronto. So tell us, what are you looking for there? What are you expecting?
Well, I'll show you Vancouver's new secondary jersey after we get done talking. It looks like graph paper. I don't know if you'd be quite as big of a fan at that point, but obviously they're playing. Vancouver's a nice young team in terms of what they do as far as their own player management. They don't have as much in relation to the U.S. men's national team as Toronto does. Obviously, we mentioned Josie Altidore coming as a designated player to Toronto to fit in with Michael Bradley, and really all eyes are going to be looking at them to see what kind of chemistry they bring, and if they can get Toronto over the hump. The stigma with Toronto has been they've always had good teams. Last year they brought Jermaine Defoe along with Michael Bradley and didn't really live up to the hype. They haven't been to the playoffs as a team for all the talent that they've had, and so Josie Altidore's homecoming is really supposed to be a big deal. We'll see if the pressure gets to him, because he's had mixed results in various spots with the microscope on him now. And I think as long as Toronto can get into a situation where I think Josie as a player is better as a downhill player with the field in front of him, even though when we see him on the men's national team, it's a lot of hold-up play with his back to the goal, trying to bring more players into the offense. even though they don't necessarily always do that. With Toronto, hopefully they let him run a little bit more. He's obviously a physical presence in the box, and he'll win his share of headers on set pieces and get some goals. But we're really going to be looking to see how Bradley can facilitate the ball up the field, because Sebastian Giovinco, who comes over from Italy, from Juventus, is a really exciting player. He's really tricky. He's very short, very small, very fast, and very good with the ball. So if they can get a nice little sort of triangle offense coming up from the back, they're definitely going to be an exciting team to watch offensively.
Yeah, and I think we both agree Altidore coming here was the right move. He needs to play, on a weekly basis. He needs to be out there instead of, not knowing when he's going to play. And then, he definitely, obviously, when his confidence is not going, we've seen it carry over to the national team and see him have struggles there. So moving on to the next game, New England against Seattle. This is another big one, obviously. This is a rematch. Is it a rematch of the MLS Cup? Am I right or no?
New England played in the MLS Cup against LA Galaxy.
Oh, LA, sorry. Well, yeah, one of those teams on the West Coast. What are we looking for here?
Well, these two teams actually played in one of the final games of the Desert Diamond Cup in the preseason, and New England came out with pretty much the lineup you'd expect to see them play, and Seattle kind of with a B lineup, so to speak. But if you're a New England Revolution fan, you have so much to be excited about, because along the back line, two of their players, one in particular with American links, Andrew Farrell, is a guy that I really like, both in real life and on FIFA 14, as we talk about very frequently. But he pairs up with Jose Gonçalves in the back, and they're just two physically imposing guys that can run, can bump guys off the ball, really make things tough in the box. And really do well to restart the offense, because down on the other end of the field you have so many players, and Juan Agudelo, who was a big deal to keep in MLS. You have Charlie Davies, who was once a big deal for the U.S. national team picture. But he's really a great story as he continues to be productive. And Tial Bunbury, another guy who plays out on the right wing, but you'll see him swing over to the left side as a goal scorer. Physically, he's got all the tools that you want. He could play in the NFL, if we're comparing him to a football players type build. And obviously Lee Gwen, who's a fan favorite in the midfield, and a young guy named Diego Fagundes, who's really sharp and snappy with the ball, can get after it. New England is going to present all kinds of matchup problems for Seattle, who I think, as long as I've been watching Seattle play MLS soccer, has never had a convincing defense, even with guys like DeAndre Yedlin on the outside. And now they're moving Brad Evans into a new position at center D. And it's they've not been convincing defensively, and New England really brings the heat offensively.
And then the game we talked about right here in Orlando, the City Beautiful, actually, where you and I are right now. Confusing nickname, really, grammatically, when you talk about Orlando City slogan. But you were expecting, the 60,000 fans. I mean, first of all, how big is this going to be from just a perception standpoint? This is obviously going to get major coverage from all the traditional media. And then what are you hoping to see on the field from two teams that you just saw play live last week?
Well, this is another reason why this is the counter argument to why a strike not happening is huge, because MLS really got lucky by the fact that Orlando, who in Florida, as we know, is kind of an apathetic sports state in general, was able to sell over 60,000 tickets to the Citrus Bowl for a soccer game. If they didn't reach that goal, we all know that Sports Center, whoever, would be mocking, making fun of them for such lofty expectations. They managed to do that. They're going to get their game in this weekend, and it's going to be really exciting, because Orlando brings a lot of variety in terms of their personnel, a lot of international players, and an exciting type of formations that are real similar to the types of formations that we see Jurgen Klinsmann's trying to implement with the U.S. men's national team, which kind of harkens back to our conversation about Breck and his effectiveness. But there's a lot of guys that I like on that team. With a home field advantage, they should really be able to give NYCFC a good game. And I think if they can get their offense right, they're pinning a lot of their hopes on a lot of young players. One of their designated players is Brian Roche, who's from Honduras. He's like 19 or 20 years old. And in a couple of preseason games, he's usually good for like one or two really convincing strikes on goal, but sometimes he can kind of get lost in the mix. Obviously, Kaká, who's a much bigger and more physically imposing player than you would think coming from a Brazilian sort of style of play. You know, he can really hold the ball up in midfield, get other guys into the picture, and they'll really be taking some shots on New York. I mean, it's going to be an interesting counter sort of strategy between Orlando's trying to push the ball upfield and New York City FC's kind of, as we mentioned, Jason Kreis coming from Real Salt Lake and Kyle Beckerman's style of play, holding the ball up out of the back, building out of the back, and you know, kind of picking and choosing your moments. But David Villa obviously can catch lightning in a bottle at the top of the formation for NYCFC. Kyrie Shelton, who's a guy that I really like, is their first-round draft pick out of the Super Draft. I'm not sure if he'll get time in this game, but you know, NYCFC has options too, and I'm really looking forward to watching that. Not just as an Orlando City kind of homer, but definitely just to see the two styles of play and a huge atmosphere. For once, we're seeing a game not played in Seattle that has a NFL-sized crowd watching, and is all going to be very rambunctious in anticipation of this game.
All right, it's like David Beckham is back all over again with his big attendance numbers. So that'll wrap it up for us here on the Far Post Podcast. We'll be back probably not next week. I think we're traveling to separate areas of the country, but at least in about 10 days. We'll try to keep these coming to you weekly if we can. Be sure to check out ussoccerpost.com. We'll have fresh content up there. Nick's still got a couple interviews from Charleston that he's going to roll out. So a lot of stuff coming, lots of video and written content. So keep checking in with us, US Soccer Post, as we continue to grow.